April 1989. Rome, Italy. A woman named Carla Leone is sitting at a kitchen table in an apartment on the Via Apennini. She is 61 years old. The apartment is quiet in the particular way apartments go quiet when the person who filled them is no longer there. The plants on the windowsill are alive. The books on the shelves are where they always were. The coffee cup she set out this morning is the same cup she has used every morning for 31 years. Her husband died 12 days ago. He was 60 years old. He had been working until the end. The picture he was planning has no director now. The studio will find another one. It will be fine. It will not be the same. In the afternoon, there is a knock at the door. She is not expecting anyone. She goes to the door. She opens it. A man is standing in the hallway in a plain dark jacket with a hat in his hands. He has not shaved in several days. He is alone. He has no assistant with him, no driver waiting at the stairs.
He says her name the way a man says a name when he has been practicing it in a language that is not his own. She looks at him. She knows this face. She has known this face since 1964. This is that story. The one that was not in the obituaries. The one that stayed between three people for a very long time. Sergio Leone was born in Rome in 1929. His father was a silent film director. His mother was an actress. He grew up in the dark of projection rooms, watching American westerns through the cigarette smoke, learning the grammar of the genre before he could name what grammar meant. He spent his early career as an uncredited assistant on other men's pictures, carrying equipment and keeping his mouth shut and watching everything. By 1964, he had a small budget, a story he had been working on for 3 years, and a list of American actors he wanted for the lead. Every name on the list said no. One of them did not say no. He was 23 years old, under contract to CBS, known primarily for a television western that paid him $500 an episode. His name was Clint Eastwood. He flew to Rome in the spring of 1964 with a suitcase and no particular expectation. What happened over the next 6 months changed both of their lives completely, and in ways that neither of them could have predicted, standing in a dusty square in Almeria, Spain, arguing through a translator about how many seconds a man should take to draw a gun. Leone did not speak English. Eastwood did not speak Italian. They communicated through an interpreter on set, and through something else entirely off it. The language men use when they are both trying to make the same thing, and understand each other well enough to argue about how. They argued about pace. They argued about silence. Leone believed in long silences before violence the way other directors believed in dialogue. Eastwood found this strange at first, and then understood it, and then internalized it so completely that it became part of how he moved through every scene he ever directed himself. Leone believed in faces. He would hold on a face for 10 seconds, 15, 20, while the music built and the eyes said what the script could not. Eastwood had never been directed this way before. No one had ever told him that his face, held still and saying nothing, was the most interesting thing in the frame. Leone told him this on the 3rd day of the shoot. He told him through the interpreter, and then directly in broken English, pointing at the camera, and then at Eastwood's eyes. "Your eyes," he said. "Just the eyes. Just still." "Yes?" Eastwood looked at him for a long moment. "Yes," he said. They understood each other from that afternoon forward. They made 3 pictures together, the Dollars trilogy. A Fistful of Dollars,
For a few dollars more, the good, the bad, and the ugly. 3 pictures that invented a genre, or reinvented it. Or more precisely, took a genre that had become comfortable and domestic and stripped it back down to something elemental and strange and true. Leone gave Eastwood the silence. Eastwood gave Leone the American face, the particular stillness that read across a wide screen as authority without effort. Together they made something neither of them could have made alone. When they finished the 3rd picture in 1966, Eastwood went back to California. He made other pictures. So did Leone. They were not close in the way that men who share long hours and common purpose are sometimes close. They were not friends who called each other at Christmas or met for dinner in Los Angeles. What they were was something harder to name. 2 men who had done something together that mattered, who understood what the other had contributed, who carried a debt to each other that neither had ever spoken aloud, because speaking it aloud would have made it smaller than it was. Leone spent the 23 years after the trilogy trying to make the picture he believed was his best work, Once Upon a Time in America. It took him until 1984 to finish it. It was 4 hours long. The American studio cut it to 2 hours and released it without his approval. It was a failure in America. In Europe, it was understood. In Europe, critics called it a masterpiece. Leone believed they were right. He was not a modest man about his work. He had earned the right not to be modest. But the American failure hurt him in ways he did not discuss publicly and did carry privately. He began a new project, a picture about the siege of Leningrad. He worked on it for 5 years. He died in Rome on April 30th, 1989, of a heart attack. He was 60 years old. He was alone in his study when it happened. Carla found him in the morning. "Where are you watching from? Drop your state in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches." Carla Leone had married Sergio in 1960. She had been 22 years old, and he had been 30, and already certain about everything, which was either a quality or a flaw, depending on the day, and she had decided early on that it was mostly a quality. She had lived with his certainty for 29 years. She had lived with his rages about the American studio, and his long silences about the Leningrad project, and his particular morning habit of drinking coffee standing up at the kitchen counter because he said sitting down slowed his thinking. She had never told him to sit down. She had made the coffee the way he wanted it, strong and without milk, and let him stand at the counter and think. For 29 years she had let him stand at the counter and think. Now the counter was empty every morning, and the coffee cup she set out was her own, and the apartment was quiet in the way that apartments go quiet when the person who filled them is no longer there. She had 2 children. They were grown and had their own lives and came when they could. Her friends came and went. The Italian film community sent flowers and letters and came to the funeral and said the right things. The American studios sent nothing. Not a letter, not a call, not a telegram. Leone had made them a great deal of money in 1966 and 1967, and they had cut his masterpiece in half in 1984, and now he was dead, and they sent nothing. Carla noticed this. She was not a woman who let things pass without noticing them. 12 days after the funeral, in the afternoon, there was a knock at the apartment door on the Via Apennini. Carla went to the door and opened it. The hallway was dim. The man standing in it was tall and lean and had not shaved in several days. He was wearing a plain, dark jacket and holding a hat in both hands the way a man holds a hat when he is not certain of his welcome. He was 58 years old. He said her name first, then his own, as if she might need both pieces of information to place him. She did not need either. She knew who he was. She had seen this face on a screen in a darkened theater in Rome in the autumn of 1964, not knowing yet that the man wearing it would become famous, knowing only that her husband had chosen him, and that her husband did not choose wrong. She had watched this man carry 3 of Sergio's pictures on his face, and his stillness and his particular way of existing in a frame without needing to announce himself.
She had seen him at the premiere of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. She had met him twice on set, briefly, years ago. She had not spoken to him since. She had not expected to see him here. She stepped back from the door. She said in English that was careful and formal and very correct, "Come in, Mr. Eastwood." He came in. He sat at the kitchen table where she had been sitting. She made coffee. She made it strong and without milk because she had made coffee this way every morning for 29 years, and she did not know how to make it any other way. She set 2 cups on the table. She sat across from him. He held the cup in both hands and looked at it for a moment before he spoke. He said, "I am sorry I did not come sooner. I should have come sooner." She said, "You came." He looked at the table. He looked at the window where the plants were on the sill. He said, "I have been trying to think of what to say." She said, "You do not have to say anything." He said, "No, I want to say it." He looked up. He said, "I have made a great many pictures. Some of them were good and some were less good, and I know the difference. The ones that were good, the ones I am proud of, the ones I am still proud of, have something in them that I learned in Almeria in 1964. The patience, the silence." The idea that a face held still can say more than a page of dialogue. He did not give me a technique. He gave me an understanding. That is a different thing. You can unlearn a technique. You cannot unlearn an understanding. It becomes part of how you see. She was looking at him across the table. She did not speak. He said, "I wanted you to know that. I wanted to say it to you because I never said it to him directly. Men do not say these things directly. They mean to, and they do not, and then the time is gone." She looked at the window. Then she looked back at him. She said, "He knew." She said it quietly, but without hesitation. "He knew what he had given you. He was very proud of it. Not in a way he would have said, but in the way that a man is proud of something that turned out the way he intended. He talked about those pictures still. He talked about your face. He said your face was the one face he ever directed that understood silence better than the camera." She stopped. She pressed her lips together for a moment. She said, "I am glad you came." They sat at the table for 1 hour and 40 minutes. She talked about the Leningrad project. She talked about the last 5 years and the work Sergio had been doing and the research he had gathered and the script that was almost finished when he died. She talked about the American studio and the editing of Once Upon a Time in America. She talked about that particular wound, which was a wound she had watched him carry for 5 years, and which he had carried quietly and badly, the way men carry wounds they cannot put down and will not discuss. Eastwood listened. He did not interrupt. He did not offer opinions on the studio or the cut or the years of aftermath. He let her talk the way a man lets a person talk when he understands that the talking is not for him, but for the person doing it, and that his job is only to be present and still, and to not fill the silence with himself.
He had learned this from Leone in Almeria in 1964. The silence is not empty.
It is the most full kind of thing there is. He sat at the kitchen table of the man who had taught him this, and he practiced it for 1 hour and 40 minutes. And when Carla was done talking, she looked at him and said, "You are a very quiet man for an American." He said, "I had a good teacher." When he stood to leave, he reached into the inside pocket of his dark jacket and brought out a plain envelope, sealed, with no writing on the front. He set it on the table beside the coffee cups. He said, "This is not for anything. It is not an obligation. If it is useful, use it. If it is not useful, do not." She looked at the envelope. She looked at him. She said, "Mr. Eastwood, I cannot." He said, "It is not from me." He picked up his hat. He said, "It is Sergio's money. He earned it. Your husband made me. Whatever I became in front of a camera, I became because of those 3 pictures in those 2 years. Whatever I earned because of that, a portion of it is his. He has been owed it for 23 years. He said it simply, the way a man states an arithmetic that is not complicated, but has been left undone too long. She did not answer. He put on his hat. He said, "Good night, Mrs. Leone." He walked to the door. He opened it himself. He stepped into the dim hallway. He pulled the door gently closed behind him. She heard his footsteps on the stairs. She heard the street door. Then she heard nothing. The apartment was quiet again. She sat at the table. She looked at the envelope. She looked at the window where the plants were on the sill. The afternoon light was going. She did not move for a long time. Then she picked up the envelope and held it in her hands. It was heavy. It was heavier than a letter. She set it back down on the table. She thought about what he had said. "It is Sergio's money. Your husband made me." She looked at Sergio's coffee cup still on the counter where she had not moved it, the cup she had not been able to put away in 12 days. She looked at the envelope. She thought about 29 years of strong coffee without milk and long silences about the Leningrad project, and a man who stood at the counter to think because sitting down slowed him. She opened the envelope. She did not tell anyone what was in it. Not her children, not her friends in the Italian film community, not the journalists who came to write about Sergio in the months and years after his death. She did not tell anyone that Clint Eastwood had come to the apartment on the Via Apennini 12 days after the funeral. She did not tell anyone about the 1 hour and 40 minutes at the kitchen table or the envelope left beside the coffee cups. She kept it the way Eastwood had left it, which was quietly, which was between the people involved, which was nobody's business but the business of a woman and the memory of a man, and the debt a second man had been carrying for 23 years and had finally set down on a kitchen table in Rome. The Leningrad project did not die with Sergio. Carla spent 7 years after his death organizing his research, his notes, his draft script. She worked with the writers he had worked with. She worked with producers who had believed in the project. In 1997, a film was made from the surviving material. Not the picture Sergio would have made, no picture made by other hands ever is, but a picture that carried his research and his vision into the world. It was received with respect. Carla attended the premiere. She sat in the dark theater and watched and thought about Sergio standing at the kitchen counter in the mornings, thinking. She thought about the apartment going quiet. She thought about the envelope. Clint Eastwood did not speak publicly about the visit to Rome. He did not mention it in interviews. He did not include it in the interviews he gave about Leone over the years, and he gave many, because journalists always wanted to talk about the trilogy and about what it had been like to work with the Italian director who had made him famous. He spoke about the work. He spoke about Almeria and the heat and the arguments about pace and the silence Leone demanded. He spoke about what he had learned. He always spoke about what he had learned. He never said that he had gone to Rome in April of 1989 and sat at a kitchen table for 1 hour and 40 minutes and left an envelope. He let that stay where he had left it. Some things are worth more left alone than explained. Some debts are better paid quietly, without a receipt, without an audience, without the story traveling before you are out of the building. He had learned this too, though not from Leone. This one he had known himself. Some men are made by what they are given. Some men make themselves by what they give back and never mention. Eastwood was both kinds of man. The first kind, from 1964 to 1966, in a dusty square in Almeria with an Italian director who believed in faces. The second kind for the rest of his life, beginning on an April afternoon in 1989, in a dim hallway on the Via Apennini, hat in hand, alone. The plants on the windowsill of the apartment on the Via Apennini are no longer there. Carla Leone died in 2014. She was 86 years old. She had outlived Sergio by 25 years. She had kept the apartment for all of them. Her children cleared it in the months after she died, the careful, slow work of emptying a life that 2 people had lived together and 1 had continued alone. They found the books in their places. They found the coffee cups. They found a wooden box on the shelf in the bedroom. Inside the box were letters and photographs and documents that a long life accumulates. One of them was an envelope, sealed, no writing on the front. Inside was a note on plain paper, 2 lines. It said, "He made me. This is what he was owed." There was no signature. Carla's daughter held the note for a long time. She looked at the handwriting. She showed it to her brother. He looked at it. Neither of them said anything for a while. Then the daughter said, "Do you know whose handwriting this is?" Her brother shook his head. She thought about it for a long time. Then she said, "I think I do." She put the note back in the envelope. She put the envelope back in the box. She put the box in the pile of things that were going to her house, not the pile for donation, not the pile for discard. The box is in her house now. She has not talked about it publicly. She may never talk about it publicly. There are things that are worth more kept than told. And there are things that travel anyway, quietly, because true things do. They find the people who need them. They arrive on their own schedule, in their own time, and they sit at the kitchen table until you are ready to open them. That is the whole of it. That is the kind of man Clint Eastwood was. Not the kind who makes sure the story travels, the kind who pays what is owed and leaves. And unfortunately, they do not make men like that anymore. If this story reached you, pass it on. Subscribe if you haven't yet. There are more stories like this one, and every single one of them deserves to be told.